I'm going to show you how to take a one-channel amp like this Vox AC-30 and turn it into a switchable three-channel amp by adding two preamps to the effects loop. Besides having the effects loop on the amp, you're going to need some way to switch the preamps. I'm going to use this disaster area bypass looper. And for the preamps, I'm going to use these two pedal preamps by a company called AMT Electronics. The V1 is a AC-30 style preamp, and I'm going to use that as an overdriven tone. And the P2 is a 5150 style preamp, and that's going to be more of a heavy metal distorted tone. You might be asking, what's the difference between doing this and just putting distortion boxes before your amp? Well, the main difference is each of these preamps, including the one that's in the AC-30, are going to be mutually exclusive. That's to say, none of them are going to run into each other or cascade. When you put distortion boxes before an amp, you're running that distortion pedal into the clean channel of the amp. So it's a balance. You have to change the knobs on the distortion pedal, change the knobs on the clean channel. One thing affects the other. It takes a while to get it dialed in. In this way, if you want to change the distortion sound, you just deal with the settings on your preamp, and it won't affect anything else. Also, if you like the distortion on your amp itself, then you can have a clean preamp. Like this V1 can be a clean channel. You can't do that with a pedal in front of a distorted amp. It's always going to be distorted no matter what you do. Alright, quick demo of switching between the preamps. I'm using the bypass looper in manual mode. The first switch is the AC-30 clean channel. The second switch is the V1 preamp. And the third one is the P2. Now this bypass looper has the ability to store programs. So instead of having to turn one pedal off to turn another one on, I simply make the programs to switch between them instantly. This bypass looper also has MIDI functionality, so if I wanted to, I can hook a MIDI pedal up to this and control that from the stage, and then just leave all of this and all the cables and everything in the back. I'll demonstrate that a little later. The other thing I mentioned is you could have the amp distorted and use one of the preamps as your clean channel. Let me just demo that real quick. I'm going to crank up the AC-30 preamp to a distorted overdriven tone. Okay, so I've broken it down to its most basic setup. This is a lot like running your guitar directly into the AC-30, except there's a bypass looper in the mix. You run your guitar directly into the bypass looper here. Then you choose one of your loops to be your main amp. I have loop number 5. From that loop, you run out to the input of the amp, and then you return from the effects loop of the amp. So the effects loop send on the amp comes back into your loop, and then you run out of the bypass looper to the effects return of your effects loop. And so with that set up, when you have loop number 5 in this case active, your main amp is ready to go. These green lights are loop 5, 6, 7, and 8. Now let me go ahead and add the V1 pedal. I'm going to choose loop number 6. So you go out of loop number 6 into the preamp, and then you return from the preamp into loop number 6. So now if you engage Loop number 6, the V1 pedal is your preamp, and the AC-30's preamp is off. And obviously, to add the next preamp, I'll choose loop number 7, send to the preamp, return from the preamp. Loop number 7 is now the P2. Alright, last thing I want to show you is hooking a MIDI pedal up to the system. I have a MIDI controller here by Peak MIDI Switching Products, and run a MIDI cable into the bypass looper, and with a little bit of programming you can make the bypass looper changes, so now you're switching the channels on your amp essentially. Now obviously this bypass looper has foot switches, and if you want to you can just do your foot switching here. This works more into a larger system with a lot of pedals. Also, you might want to leave this back behind your amp because there's a lot of cables involved. So, you know, if this is up front on your stage, then all your pedals are up front, and all the cables running to your amp and your effects loop are running between your back line and your position in the front of the stage. With a MIDI pedal, you can just push all that back and just have this sitting up front and make your switches.